This afternoon we're going to talk about the umpire and the duties thereof and some of the rules of the game. I think Rooster has a few words he wants to say before we start.
Thanks, Beans. You know, it's important to look the part, to dress the part, to know the rules. And I know personally it came from asking around, where can I find the best assembly of rules? Where can I find a top hat? Where should I have a cane? What kind of coin should I flip? And when I experienced that need, the VBBA provided some guidance, and other captains and other guys that I knew that were umpiring provided guidance. What I wanted to do with you today is encapsulate all that, put it together so we can hand off a guideline for becoming equipped, having a set of rules, having a good working knowledge of what is local custom versus the actual rule in 1860 and other years too, because we've got clubs that play 58, 60, and 64 in the St. Louis area. So you know, as Beans is here in his handout, you know, most importantly we want to have fun, and I've had the most fun at fields where there's an umpire in full dress. When it's me in my uniform or somebody else in uniform, it just doesn't seem to have the same appeal. Looking at it from the spectator's point of view, I think if they're looking at a gentleman who's in dress and using the proper terminology and has a good working knowledge of the rules, that makes the educational experience and the entertainment factors both go up. So you know, having rules in your back pocket, sometimes underneath your hat, good place to pull them from. The VBBA has provided some good reference material. We've gone over that with our local captains, with yourself, Beans. You've been playing now how many years?
This will be my 15th.
So 15th, and the Stags are going into their 8th season. So we've compiled some knowledge here together to hand off and educate folks, and that's today's umpiring school at Moose Meadow. So I'll hand it back to Beans. Thank you for putting this together.
Okay. Well, first off, I just want to show you, and this is something that I put together a few years back. It's the Vintage Baseball Association rules. It actually has the rules in it from 1858 to 1867. I'm not going to go through it because it's pretty well self-explanatory, but in the red in there, it shows what changed in what year. So it's kind of a help when it comes to seeing when certain rules changed, when certain rules were adopted. There's add-ons in some of the later years, but since we're only doing more or less 58 to 60, most of the rules have stayed the same, and I'll talk about those rules that changed here a little bit between the two. The other item I have is actually the Beatles dime baseball player, and that's the rules book. Put this together. It's basically the rules as they were put together in the Beatles original book. So when you read them, it's what the gentleman put together in that book, and it has not been changed. So that's where some of these rules now with the VBBA, they're getting together and they're actually going through every year. They've went through 60, they're finishing up 61 this year, and then they're going to go back to 58. So they are changing some of the rules and some of these things so that they're worded properly, so that people understand what they are. In the umpiring clinic, which is the one with the picture on the front, that's the one I want to try to go through a little bit today. And I've just picked out certain rules that kind of need to be addressed. Basically, the bat and other equipment, first off, which is in section 2, is to be 2.5 inches diameter, no more than, and any length. It can be any length that you want. So it can be short, it can be long. They didn't change the rule on a 42-inch long bat until basically, I think, 67. But I think it's in another one of the printouts. So, I mean, as you look through them, I'm not going to go through all these today, but as you look through them, you'll see that some of the things changed. The bat itself. We're trying to get away from the bamboo bats, so I would think that as arbitrators go and as team captains and as clubs go, we need to try to at least tell the guys, hey, no bamboo bats, and of course we can't use aluminum, it's all wood. Get the logos, you know, off of things, and make sure that you're kind of following the rules. Bases, the bases are 12 inches, just like normal. If you don't tie them down, actually it's where the base goes. If you kick the base going down the first base line, the safe haven is the base. It's not where it was. So that's one of the things that an umpire is not sure about sometimes. Most of the time, gentlemanly, you just let them get back to the base, pick it up, put it back where it was.
Can I pick the base up and run down the line?
No, that's ungentlemanly, sir. Pitching in balks. All right, when a hurler gets ready to throw the ball and he has made any kind of movement towards home plate, he has to deliver the ball. That means even if the batter steps out of the batter's box, he has to deliver the ball to the plate. If not, you can call a balk. And on a balk, anybody gets to take one base. So therefore, once you start making your motion towards the plate, no matter what the batter does, no matter what a runner does, you got to make that delivery to the plate. So if you're getting ready to throw, you got to be ready to go home. You can't look around for the other bases. The fair and foul rule. This is one where we've had some change come up. We've always played that when the ball is touched, it's where the ball hits the ground. That is not true. That is not, I mean, we've played that way for years. I've played that way for years. It's going to be hard to get used to, but it's where the ball actually touches the player. So if the player is in fair territory, but he reaches outside the line to try to catch the ball, he's touched the ball in foul territory, it's a foul ball, no matter where it drops. If he's in fair territory and he touches the ball, even if it drops in foul territory, it's a fair ball.
And that's intentionally done sometimes.
And that is intentionally done today, that a player may be on the line and he'll shield himself in the direction of the foul line, so if he drops the ball, he's dropping it in the foul territory. That's not the case though. The case is where the player touches the ball in regards to the line, not where he's standing, but where the ball touches him in regards to the line. So that brings up the other point of where the umpire should be stationed. The umpire should always be stationed on a right-handed batter, back behind far enough that he's in line with the plate and third base, so that when the ball is hit, he can see where that ball is being touched. It also gives him a better view of where that ball hits the ground first. If he's standing over here, he's not going to see as easily where that ball was touched and stuff. Also, the first quarter of the plate, when you're looking at the plate, the first quarter from first to third is fair ball. It is a fair ball off that plate. This is the reason why they moved this line here and had people so that they had to either straddle the plate, the line, they had to have 1 foot at least on the line or in front or in back. You couldn't have both feet behind, you couldn't have both feet in front. If you had both feet behind at that time, if you hit the ball on the ground here, the umpire could actually call a fair ball because you're actually moving your plate back. So therefore, they've adopted the rule where you have to have a foot on each side of the line.
Good clarification and a good point of being in position to call. The umpire needs to be in position, not talking to a spectator, not doing anything but focusing on that foul line, depending upon a left-handed or right-handed.
Very true, very true. And that's part of what you'll see later. I mean, inside some of this stuff, I may not go through it all, but an arbitrator is there to make the call, especially a foul ball. As soon as that ball hits foul, he's got to yell out foul, and he's got to yell it out loud enough that anybody that's on base hears it. Even the outfielders should hear it, because if the outfielder hears foul ball, he knows he has to go after it because he may have a play somewhere. Now in 1860, the rules that we normally play by, that ball in foul territory can come back to the pitcher, and as long as he gets it, he can play on anybody going back to the bag, or he can play the bag itself that they're going back to. In 58, there was no free backs. Unfortunately, we've got to the point where everybody thought there was free backs, but that was not the case. There, you could go back to the bag, and they couldn't play on you directly from the pitcher to the base, but if the pitcher was ready to throw and the hurler was there, he could throw home, the catcher could get it, and he could throw to first base and get you out going back to the bag if you didn't make it back in time. So there was no actual free backs, but it was a different way of doing it. You had to deliver the ball to the plate before you could go to the base. The pitcher he was the tempo of the game. So the pitcher would, they didn't take a lot of time. They got the ball and they delivered it to the batter. So I mean, therefore, the striker had to be ready. He had to be in position, and the pitcher had to throw. You could not throw a pitch out, and you could not have the catcher come out in front of the plate to get the ball. It had to be delivered to the striker, and then the catcher could make a play.
That's interesting to know, because we've got some clubs in our circuit that play 58 rule.
Yes, exactly.
Think about the ground squirrels.
Yeah.
And, we always think, oh, we get a breather, there are free backs. But if the hurler, the pitcher, delivers the ball to the catcher, and the catcher fires down to a man who's lackadaisical in getting back, he could be put out.
Yes, yes, very. The next section is basically on striking out. You can strike out on 3 strikes. Also back in 1858, in which a lot of people didn't realize, you could call balls and you could call strikes, not balls, but strikes. So if a pitcher was throwing to the striker, and the striker was not swinging at pitches that were good pitches, hittable pitches, and that doesn't necessarily mean they had to be across the plate, but they were hittable. Anywhere in here that was hittable, it was the discretion of the umpire that he could call strikes. Now you have to warn the batter first that he was going to start calling strikes, and then he can call strikes. Any 3 swinging misses are called strikes, would therefore be an out. Foul balls did not count, but a catcher, if he muffed it, if he didn't catch it on first bounce or on the fly, the runner could run just like as if he had hit the ball. So then the catcher had to throw to first for the out. That meant every other player had to advance too, not if they were on third and first. He would have to advance, third base would not have to advance. Now, if the bases were loaded and that happened, the catcher actually could tag home plate and throw to first for an out. And this evidently happened up in Detroit last year in some kind of big tournament they had where the bases were loaded, and the catcher, instead of, the guy on third did not move, the catcher muffed the ball intentionally, so they say. He threw to first, and instead of tagging here and going to first, he threw to first, and the guy came home from third. The guy threw wild at home, and they ended up winning the game. So it's one of those things that a lot of arbitrators don't call balls or call strikes. If the guy's sitting there not taking pitch, not swinging, we're going to start calling them. I think that's one of the rules we need to, get back into the game.
I would agree, to keep the flow going, to keep the pitcher from serving up 15, 20 throws to one person. We don't want to be selfish, but the key is to warn the striker.
Right.
Now, a question. When could balls be called? You're focusing on 58, that strikes could be called, but
balls were not called until later, like in 64 or 67. I'd have to go through some of the rules that Corky Gaskell, Goose from the Minnesota club, he has sitting in with the VBA members on doing these rules. I've also talked to Eric Miklich, I think it is, and he has also helped me with some of the rules too. Honest Al from the Long Nines has put in some things on this too. So I mean, this is not just us clubs doing this. This is basically a conglomeration of a whole bunch of different people that's went together on this.
To that point, Goose is putting on a similar type clinic at the Branson VBBA conference early next month. We're about 3 weeks out from that today. Okay. And he plans to have a presentation. So
I may think about going now then, if that's the case. So, all right, touched by the ball, meaning if you are tagged going anywhere with the ball, As long as the person had it in his possession when he touched you, you're out. Whether you drop the ball after you've been tagged, doesn't make any difference. It's once you're touched, you're out. But he has to have possession. He can't be coming around with the ball coming out of his hand. That doesn't, that don't work. So, running on foul and fair balls, basically the 1858 rules was the old free backs. I've just explained that a little bit. In our group, if it's a foul ball in 1860, you got to get back to the bag before the pitcher gets the ball and he can play on you. The fair and foul, again, I just discussed earlier. If it's where you touch the ball in whatever foul or fair territory you're in, that's where the call is made. It's not where the ball actually lands then. Now, if the ball hits the bag is, fair territory. If the ball hits on a line drive off the bag, it's fair territory. Ball hits off the foul pole, which we had happen last year, hits right on the foul pole and dropped down, and it dropped straight down, and I made the call of fair. It's a fair ball. It hits the pole, it's a fair ball. No matter which side it hits on, it's a fair ball. The striker's position, which I've talked about already, you have to have 1 foot on each side of the line. If they don't do that, the umpire should warn the person and say, we need at least a foot touching the line. And again, it makes the game flow better. That's why the line is there. Some places the line's not there. It's up to the discretion of the umpire to know that he's got both feet behind the plate or he's got both feet in front of the plate. So it's make the call. Don't be afraid to say it. You're the one who's making the call. You make the call. You're not going to get them all right. That's beside the point. Stick with what you got, but you got to make the call right away. That's the thing. Force plays stay in effect as long as there's a force at first and second. They can tag first base first, they can throw to second for a force out, or they can throw to third for a force out if they're forced to go to the next bag. So the out can be made behind them and it's still a force out. We play that in, I think, 58 and 60 now already. So, but it's just kind of a reminder that that's what can happen. Okay.
Running out of the baseline.
Running out of the baselines. If you run out of the baseline by 3 feet in the attempt to make, to not be tagged, you should be called out by the arbitrator, or you should be gentlemanly enough to say, I've been out of the baseline. This happens every once in a while. It's not frequent, but it does happen. And some guys, especially the younger players, will say, oh, I was in the baseline. You have to, once you round first base and you're running towards second, that's one thing. But you can't go 3 feet out of that line from, if you're out there 4 feet already rounding the base, you're going to be trying to go straight to second. Now, if the guy's out there trying to tag you and you go 3 feet one way or the other, inside is not bad, outside you can't do it at all. But you should be try to go as straight as you can towards the bases. So
I like the point that you make about the gentleman's honesty. It needs to be fair and in good nature. Everybody likes to see a good rundown. That's entertaining and it's fun. But to try and get to the bag at all costs outside of that 3 foot zone is just not what we're in it for.
Right. Obstruction and interfering with the fielder, sections 20 and 21. Interfering with the fielder would be if you actually, pushed him or in some way shoved him when you were trying to get to to the base or something, or the ball was coming through. Obstruction is really something that's not called very often, but it's there. It's when a player that gets the ball is actually out in front of the bag and keeping you from getting to the base. You got to give him that opportunity to get to the base. So when you catch the ball, especially at third base or second base, you got to give him the base. He has to be able to run to it. That doesn't mean you can't straddle it, but you got to give him the chance to get to the base. You can't be out here where he has to try to get around you some way. So that's called obstruction, and he gets the base. He can get the base. That's an umpire discretion. If for some reason the ball's coming in and you have to move over in the baseline to get it, that's a little different story. It's a discretion call of, was he taking there by the play, or was he out there blocking the base to keep the guy from getting there? The duties of the umpire is basically calling foul balls. That's the big thing. He does not, to be honest with you, and this is something that I found out, he does not really make the calls at first, second, and third or home. It's actually the players that make the calls. So he really is not involved in it until somebody says, did you, he gets asked. And if once he's asked, then he can make the call. But he doesn't really make the call. I don't think that that's a big issue with us. I think the issue is making the call. We have a few guys that make the call real fast at first base. I think, my former teammate, Mayhem, did that. And it's not bad, but because he was doing what he thought it was. But there was a couple times that people would, wait a minute, I was there, I was there before you made the tag. So.
I've heard other captains or clubs reference the term judgment. If they are seeking the decision of an umpire on a somewhat disputed play, they'll look to the umpire and judgment, please, right, sir, and go from there. And that's keeping in tune with the vernacular and the period that we're trying to present out here.
The next one was special ground rules. Basically, that's for the umpire to actually sit down with both captains before the game starts or the match starts and actually, find out, is there anything that's special about the ground rules? In most cases, not. If you're playing one base over a fence over here or something like that, that's a different story. You wouldn't want anybody to get hurt. That's what this is all about. An umpire, when it comes to the fact that he does not call timeout at any time. Time is never out in this game unless, for example, somebody was walking across the field or a kid started walking into the field. The umpire can stop the play and try to get everybody out of the way. But that's just basically safety. The umpire back in those days did not stop a game. Once he yelled play, which we used to always say striker to the line, but evidently play was the actual word. Sure. Once he says play starts. But the thing with an umpire is don't be out talking to people and don't be, doing something. When that pitcher and the striker are ready to go and the fielders are ready, be there and be ready to go. Because this game was actually a very quick-paced game back in the day. The pitcher was the person who really had, kept the pace of the game. And that's one reason why we are considering the calling strikes. If a pitcher's throwing and guys aren't swinging, that the umpire can warn the pitcher and he can start calling strikes. And it's just going to be the same thing. If he gets swings and misses, that's strike one. If the next pitch comes in and he lets it go and he's been warned already, that's strike two. And then on strike three, depends on whether the catcher gets the ball cleanly or not. So,
going back to your point of the ground rules and the umpire bringing the two captains together. We played in a lot of different fields where there are hazards or fences or foul and fair lines that need to be discussed. We need to have a good understanding of the ground rules from each field. But then at that time, some of the nuances should be agreed upon by both captains too. Right. What era rules are we playing? Are we playing 2 steps off the bag, which is kind of an adaptation, a modern adaptation, right. Or are we playing open fielding? And coming to a consensus and an understanding for safety's sake, for fair play's sake, before the match happens.
Right.
That's an umpire's a big responsibility, as well as flipping for who strikes first or who's in the field first.
Right. The umpire positions, which I covered a little bit earlier, but I will cover them again. When an umpire is umpiring, he should be in position on a right-handed batter. He should be back here so he can look through the plate to first base and make that call. Same thing on a left-handed batter. He should be positioned on this side so he can see down the line. That's the way it should be done. That's the way that Goose said that he does it. That's the way that they said that most of them did it back in the day.
Keep it moving.
Keep it moving and keep it going. And like I said earlier, for some of them that just got here, the first quarter of the plate is fair. If it hits that plate in the front, it's a fair ball. Because the section of the line. Huh?
That's a change. Jim with the Bulls told me that anytime.
No, it is. It's in the rules. Okay. It's in the. But anything right here, that line goes from home plate, the middle of home plate to third, and to first. So this is fair ball.
Plate there, the point of the plate would cover that. What the point of the plate would cover is fair.
Yeah, yeah. This front point right here.
What
Right there.
the point of the
Right.
new-
Okay,
the
that's
home.
good. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Leadoffs, back in the day, leadoffs were allowed anywhere you wanted to be. We, as the 1860 rules, we decided that we were going to two-step leadoff. 1858s, there are some teams that do no leadoffs. So again, it's for the umpire to talk to basically the captain of the home team and find out, especially in 1858, do you lead off or do you not? And then that rule is said to both clubs.
When we played in the North last year in Detroit, they had what was called a gentleman's lead. Now they were playing to an 1867 set of rules where stealing was allowed.
Right.
And the gentleman's lead was as much as you wanted to take before the hurl, for the pitch. Here we generally do 2 steps, but going back to the captains before the game so we have an understanding and keeping it fair for all is the way.
Now also, and I haven't got a clarification on this one yet, and I forgot all about this one, but if a runner's on first base and he takes a 2-step lead, we have some hurlers that will try to pick him off of first base. I'm almost definitely sure that he has to get back to the bag. Now, if it's an overthrow, therefore he can go to second or try for second then if he wants. But he has to get back to first when the play is first made over to the plate, to the bag.
Before he goes to second.
Before he gets a chance to go to second.
When there's an overthrow.
Yeah, he has to get back to the bag first. Yeah.
Interesting.
Sliding, although sliding was allowed back in the day, there was no head first sliding. It was all hands first sliding. And I think for the safety reason, that's one of the reasons why we don't have sliding in ours, is because a lot of people can get hurt going hands first into a bag, especially in modern era. The bags are tied down and they're solid. You reach into the bag, you can break a finger very easily. These are a little bit easier, but we've kind of disallowed the sliding. That doesn't mean that if you overrun the bag, you can't dive back, but most of the time you're diving back anyway. You're not sliding back into the bag. So
If there's a new player that's playing and he goes into second base and it's a close play and he's going to tag him out and he slides in, what do you call?
he's out.
All right.
We've done that before. I think
happened in
years ago when the Stags first started, that came up one time, and I'm not even sure who it was, but he goes, oh, he says, you're right, I apologize, sure. and he called himself out.
All right.
I think the intent in sliding today is to avoid injury, to avoid a collision. As much as it is.
As an old man, I don't want anybody around my legs. I'm telling you that right now.
Nobody wants to go to the dentist for some unneeded work, but.
Well, a good case on this is one of the players from Minnesota 2 years ago was playing in the Ohio Cup, and he was playing, I think, third base, and the guy comes sliding into third base and took his feet out, and when he went down, he did like a roll and came down. He got a concussion, and I don't think he's played since. That's Cow Patty, that played with them. Yeah. He got messed up pretty good. So, and that was a young guy, that was energetic. And fines, even though the fines are not part of VBBA, we do want to keep that. We want, and it was brought up not too long ago that maybe we should have somebody that actually gets fined every match, especially when there's a lot of cranks around. Go ahead and spit one time and get fined. Arbitrators should probably, the umpire should probably know, hey, I'm gonna do that this inning, keep an eye on me. And the right way for the players, once he's been fined, is the umpire tells the player, you must go over and apologize. So he has to stand there and apologize. Many, many years ago when I first started, the Trenton Mains were in existence, and one of the guys on the Trenton Mains that actually ran it, he would actually spit, and his wife would be in the stands, and she would be the one that says, Mr. Arbitrator, I have a problem with your second baseman. He's out there spitting, and then he would call a fine, and he'd have to pay the fine. He'd have to apologize to the cranks in the stands. So I think it's something that we need to do. I agree. There are times that I hear a cuss word. It's not bad, but call it. I mean, you're the guy that's got to keep this under control.
It's those Irishmen on the Stags. You gotta calm them down.
The majority of our club's gone today because of the holiday.
We fine most people for just showing up.
If you're Chris Birch, he could probably do a little section here on fines. But as an umpire, when there's a guy like Chris Birch around, you want to have a booklet and a pencil in your pocket so you can keep track of the number of fines that gentleman accrues.
It's just like soccer, you know, book them.
Well, what I have done in the past, I've called fines, and I've told the gentleman, see that young kid right over there? Go pay him $25. He's the person that we're trying to keep from, you know, using the bad words, using the, you know, anything bad. Go to the kids out there, and that's where you're going to pay your fine. The fine, some people throw them in a jar or something that they got. I'd rather see the kids out there that you've actually done something that you're not supposed to do. Apologize to them and give the $25 to the kids.
We've collected them and sent a donation to St. Jude's.
That's fine too. I mean, anything like that, I don't think the club should keep it. No. We don't get that much anyway. If you get $1 a game, you're probably, well, I won't say that.
Certain players within our organization, you could go all day long.
Well, I've had some people say, oh yeah, it cost me $25. Here's $1 because it's not going to be the last one. Okay, whatever. The last couple of 3 pages is basically something that the Brown Stockings had. It's the Midwest Vintage Baseball Association mission statement and code of conduct. They had a 3-page flyer that basically told standards of the gentlemanly behavior, standards of the gentlemanly behavior was continued there, and for the club umpire. So, I mean, I'm going to let you guys read through them because most of the rules and stuff have been talked about here. I'll hand out more stuff to the guys that just came in, and if you got any questions when you look through them, you know, talk to me. If it's a question I don't know, I'm going to go and find out because I can get a hold of Eric Miklich, I can get a hold of Goose, I can get a hold of Honest Al. So there's ways to get this stuff, information done. The VBBA is looking, like I said, they're looking at all the different rules from all the different years because there are a lot of different, you know, things out there. So ask questions, but as an umpire, make the call. Like Goose said, you're gonna make the call. You're not gonna get them all right, but make the call. And the big one is, and he really, you know, pushes that one is, when that ball is foul, you got to yell foul. You got to let those players that are on base know that it's a foul ball. You can't sit there and wait and then have somebody go, what was that? Oh, it was foul. You got to yell foul, and you got to yell it loud. Like the guy said, if there's a bunch of people out there, you got to yell it loud enough that they can hear it, because they're in peril when it starts to come to running. They got to get back to the bag. And for those that just got here and didn't know, the rule on where the ball bounces first is not necessarily true. If the third baseman is standing on third, you know, inside the line on third base, and he reaches out here to try to catch the ball, he's touched it in foul territory. It's not where the ball bounces, which we have been playing for years. It's where that player touches that ball. So if he could be in fair territory, but if he's reaching out here, and that's why it's so important for the umpire to be in line so he can see where that ball is in respects to third base and the foul pole, because if that guy reaches out here and he touches it, it's foul ball. If he's standing in foul territory and the wind takes it back in and he touches it over here in fair territory, fair ball, no matter what.
He's got a line drive hit at him at third base, and this happened during the Missouri Cup against one of the newer teams. He was in fair territory. He tried to catch the ball, and it went foul. It's a foul ball.
No, it's a fair ball.
Fair ball.
He's on the fair territory, and
he touched it in fair.
He touched it in fair territory, though. Okay. The ball itself, when he touched the ball, where was the ball at? In fair territory or foul territory?
That's wrong. Okay, I stand
No,
corrected.
that's the thing, though. No, we played that rule. We've played that rule for a long time.
But as far as like obstacles and so forth that are in the field of play, trees,
fences, buildings that are close, if it bounces off the building and goes in fair territory, that's a fair ball.
Okay.
It's where the player touches the ball.
Ooh, that's
With the
good.
player
I
is the
have to
only
change my
governing factor
philosophy
there,
there.
right?
So in other words, you got to be looking. I mean, that's a line drive right at you. You know he's in fair territory. He touched it in fair territory. Now, if the line drives out here, and he tries to stab it, you gotta see where that line is, where that ball is.
Okay, Beans, one of the hardest things about this is that there's no lines.
There was no lines. There will not be any lines until 62. Oh no, yeah, 62. It's in one of the sheets that I've got.
Okay.
In 62, they decided to put lines down. So in 58 and 60, you won't have lines. I like them too, but
do too.
yeah, especially right in here.
Right.
It would be
there,
yeah,
right there.
yeah. But there was no lines until 62.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
Question.
I'm sorry,
Are
I'm
there
late.
any hand signals that we want to emphasize? Because I know that's what's one of the reasons umpires do it, so the fans and the cranks can see what the calls are.
No, basically, if the umpire, if it's a foul ball, he's got to yell foul. Right. If it's a fair ball, he's not saying anything at all. He's not making any comment. Now, some umpires will sit there and they'll just put their hand in, like it's a fair ball. They'll do that, but they don't make any calls. It's basically only on foul balls that they will make any kind of call at all. And like I said earlier, they will not even make a call on an out at first base. Right. The base runners make the call, or base runner and the base tender makes the call. If they have a problem, they can come to him, and he makes the call. Now,
I thought you'd go to the cranks.
Huh?
I thought you'd go to the cranks.
Well, you go to the umpire first. The umpire didn't see it, then they can go through the cranks. But they really don't say anything about the cranks being involved in making the calls. That's something that I think came about, through a little bit of the, just people getting, oh yeah, let's do it this way. Yeah.
One thing, Knapsack, I would say, when I umpire a match, to keep the players informed of how many outs there are. If there's one hand dead, I may say that, and I'll put one hand up, or two hands dead. And that's from playing in the outfield. If I can see the umpire say one or two, I'm keeping along with the match, and as a courtesy to the spectators as well. That's about the only hand signal I would recommend. One hand.
Even as a player out there, that's what I'll do.
Right.
I'll put one hand up for an out so everybody sees, or two,
I don't do the hands. I do
Yeah, and basically that was the other thing that Goose said too, and Honest Al both. They said, we use the term dead. It's hand out,
right,
and not hand dead.
I read that. Right.
So and that's and again they both said it's not that it's one way or the other, they don't care, but the actual term was hands dead or hands out. So
yes.
Now, like I said, there are other things in the one book. The last sheet that is there, and there's a sheet on no, I don't even know if I got that one with me.
What was the subject, sir?
Well, it was basically a year-by-year rules change.
Okay.
It showed, and I think Eric, yeah, there it is right there, short version of the rules. I got this off of Eric Micklick's website, so the last couple pages in it is, I even put his name on it. It's the history of the hit batsman, which we really don't have anything to go in, but it's something that's there for the rules. Sure. History of the strike, and basically the batter's area and position. And that kind of tells you when some of the boxes and stuff like that came up. Inside also, there's like the from year to year, if there was a rule change, it kind of told you there was a rule change. Doesn't necessarily go into a lot of depth on it. But again, look the stuff over. If you got any questions, most of you guys know my email address. And if I can't answer it right away, I'll go out and find it.
Let me ask you one question about the batters. Okay, batter comes up here, and you're supposed to stride, correct?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, batter does this.
He should have his foot at least
On the line.
on the line.
Okay.
I
What do
could,
you do
yeah.
when he does that?
No, you tell him he has to have a foot on the line or behind it.
Okay.
Now, I don't like the idea of him cheating to me.
Right. Right. That is-
I would think that most guys can sit there like that, because back in the day, if the person was back behind the line and he hit the ball back here, the arbitrator or the umpire could actually call a fair ball, because this is where he hit the ball right here, and basically he would have been in fair territory had he been up here.
Right.
So they had the right to make that call.
Okay.
So I mean, don't let the people, that's a rule that's there. We can find it for you if we ever have to find it for you. Any other questions?
It's just, doing this for the last 7 years and being an arbiter or an umpire, I don't care what you call them, I see things going on. Like the guy that hit the ball twice. I had no idea how to call that.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the rules that say you can't hit the ball twice.
It was amazing.
It's where the ball hits the ground after that. So.
Sure.
Yeah, there are certain quirks out there that you may not see them. I mean, you may not see everything that happens, and all of a sudden something will show up, and it's like you make the judgment call, you make the call, and if somebody wants to argue the point, it should be the captain of the club.
Yes.
It's not supposed to be just anybody off the club. It should be the captain that comes out and makes the. Now, if the captain sits there and says, "Yeah, you can handle it," that's one thing, but just to sit there and argue about it, no.
That's what you want to avoid. That's why I think that code of conduct that you mentioned about the brown stockings, having it in there, I think it's most important for everybody who is going to suit up and play, read that, and come out here in a spirit, in a gentlemanly spirit, who's going to live with the umpire's decision. Whether that umpire is not technically on the letter of the 1860 law, but in the spirit of following his direction.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
And my last comment was, and this happened, I was arbitrating right here, and the Stags did it. Bases were loaded, 1 out, and it was a pop fly to the third baseman, and I'm standing back here watching, and he goes and dropped it, and he throws the second, and I went, hold it, hold it. I said, all the runners are safe where they're at. It's ungentlemanly to drop the ball on purpose. Now, you can tell if a guy drops the ball on purpose, all of a sudden his hands spread and the ball drops. You can, though, if the guy's standing there and he decides to let the ball bounce, so because he's close to third base, now it's an open game. I mean, it's one bounce rule.
Sure.
I mean, you let the ball bounce, you can either catch it or you can pick it up and you can go tag your bases. But to actually have the ball hit you in the hands and then you let it drop intentionally, it's a gentleman's thing. It's a gentleman's game. You can make the call. I'll make that call every day if I have to. So.
sure.
What can team leaders and teams do to make life easier for arbitrators?
Life is not hard as an arbitrator, though.
They furnish them this type of information. They let them the umpires know what their ground rules are, so that that umpire comes in to umpire. Of course, it's the umpire's ability to go to the club and say, do you have anything here that I should know about? Right. Is there a hole over here that I should know about? Right. Basically, they actually say you should walk the field, one time so that you know what everything is, and then that way you can ask the questions. Well, what about this? What about that? Like right here, I'm sure that the rule here is if it goes over the fence, it's one base.
Yes.
Because we don't want anybody getting hurt trying to jump over the fence or go around it or whatever.
Speaking of
So it's
fences,
one base.
The backstop here is unique. So it's what is unique to that field, going over those ground rules. If you catch it up against the fence, has it touched the ground more than once? If it hasn't, it's an out.
Right.
So
Umpiring is a great way for older players to stay in the game. What are other ways that teams can convince people to become arbitrators?
I think we've seen some folks that have had some injuries, regardless of age. But You know, when you have, when you need to take time off, and I did this last year, knee was bulky and I didn't want to push it. I chose to sit out but stay engaged by umpiring. Had the get up, had the rules, went ahead and stayed a part of the game, and I think that's the interesting way to approach it. You know, I would never ask somebody to say, hey, stop playing to come out and umpire. In the same vein, if you have some time, maybe you aren't feeling 100%, we want to give you some resources, namely the rules, a quick reference guide, and in those you'll see Levine Hat Company, their website address, a local vintage store that has a few pieces. You can go to the Salvation Army, you can go to the Goodwill, you can go through your closet and find some things that would probably be right. But dressing the part and taking the role on seriously, just like you do as a ball player, is an important step to educate the spectators that are out here, and to have that just edge of authority that the players will respect you as an umpire. So whether you choose to do it full time, there's plenty of clubs in the St. Louis area that'll keep you running, as you can attest to. But I think when there's a guy in uniform standing back there making the call, it's a little bit different than there's a man in full dress. So, you know, having a hat, having a cane, having a coin to flip, having a timepiece, and having the rules on you, having a booklet to jot down the fines.
That's one of the reasons why I came up with this. You know, guys that are arbitrating, you know, put it in their pocket. You know, if somebody has a comment or a question,
Look it up.
look at it, you know. At least, because back in the day, they had their little rule book in their pocket. They had their little book. They kept their scores and everything in the book, you know, in their little book. They would even jot down when hands were, you know, put out. So I mean, everything they wrote everything down.
Knapsack, any other questions? All good? I want to say thank you for recording this and making it a priority to take time out to document the local clubs around here. Thank you for taking that time. You and Spanish Joe, thank you.